Morning, everyone. My name is Živilė Kropaitė. I'm a journalist. I'm going to be your moderator today. I want to welcome everybody participating in the second event now organized by the Office of the Government of Lithuania together with the Prime Minister's Office of Finland. This particular event, this particular discussion is on public governance and administration, and the goal of this event is to discuss the systems of public governance in both Finland and Lithuania, concentrating on the good examples that Finland has to offer. I will provide you a little bit of the context for this discussion. Lithuania has started implementing the civil service reform, and this current 18th government of Lithuania is devoting a lot of effort to it and has ambitious aims and is working hard on its implementation. Some logistics questions to be posed in the chat box are welcome all the time throughout these 2 hours while everyone is speaking. We will have a question and answer session at the end. So after the speaker is done, there will be no immediate questions, but you can continue asking them, and you can do that on the chat box, as I have mentioned, and also by raising your hand, virtual hand on MS Teams, and doing it live if you wish. So that's a little bit of logistics. The questions can also be asked in Lithuanian. We will do our best to translate it immediately to interpret. And we will begin by welcome speeches. Advisor to the Prime Minister of Lithuania, Darius Žeruolis. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Ačiū, thank you very much. Hyvää huomenta to our Finnish colleagues. Labas rytas Lietuvos kolegoms, and good morning to you all. I am very grateful to our colleagues from Finland, from the Office of Prime Minister, for agreeing to share their practices and their setup, actually. A little bit of a sort of personal note. Back in 2006, when I last visited the Prime Minister's office of Finland, I was struck how lean and efficient it was. And 15 years later, already in a new capacity now as advisor to Prime Minister of Lithuania, I was thinking that it is perhaps a good time to revisit the Finnish experience. I understand that throughout the years there were many Lithuanian deputations to Helsinki, seeing how Finnish government is set up, how agencies are working, but since now we are in the midst of actually drafting of a concept note to our government, to our cabinet actually, for endorsement, we thought that it would be also very good to revisit your experience, because many of the ideas or directions actually of our thinking is based on the Finnish experience, but also perhaps more Nordic experience in general. For the benefit of all, but also for the benefit to our Finnish colleagues, I will try to introduce some of our thinking. I'm trying to share my. Oh, sorry, this is not the one. This was meant to be context note. This is not the one, I'm sorry. It will be, I don't know why I'm not able. Okay. Just a moment, please. Oh, Shirina, can I ask for your assistance then? If you have on your screen, I see it on my computer, but I'm not able to share. Will you be able to help me?
Yes.
Okay,
Just
so
a
if you
moment.
could,
Yes.
if you could just while I'll speak, if you could
Okay.
share
Yes.
share the slides. There are no, you can see the slides, but these are not the ones which I wanted to show. Actually, these were meant as a background slides for our colleagues from Finland disseminated before the event, but these are not my speaking points. Okay, so I will start with brief introduction. If the slides are seen, to explain, yes. So this is it. Next slide, please. I want to show the scope of our strategic agenda, which more or less is about actually our reforms. It consists of 4 levels, and the top 5 actually under the first heading are the ones which are actually both in the prime ministerial portfolio, but also are labeled as the terms of the reforms of the government. Basically, it's commitment to deliver on those 5 during the terms of office, against which actually our performance will be judged. And as you can see, the civil service reform is there, and in the second batch, which is also in the prime ministerial portfolio, the first and second are the reforms which relate to civil service reforms, and altogether they form the public administration reform in general. I'll explain the interplay between them in a moment. And in addition, it is also important to tell that two educational reforms are in the top 5. Also innovations reform, which has been already introduced to the parliament and will be debated on the parliament's floor, is there. And actually a long-term care model for provision of long-term care services within top 5. Okay, the rest I will not comment. They are interesting, but not actually they don't form part of our today's discussion. Next slide, please. So I'll briefly go through why we want to reform and how we're approaching it. Ocean, next slide, please. Why reform? Actually, we, in terms of our long-term development aims and ambitions, actually it is the educational reforms are perhaps most important ones, because they would form a backbone of the high value-added economy that we want to become. But in the interim, and also as a sort of as a side one, public administration reform is the one which is crucial in order to not to lose momentum that we had up until now. Our public administration, at least for the current economic model of development, was actually provided quite a good fit, but we feel that we are losing flexibility of times and actually actually we're losing agility. So that's why, in order to be agile and fit for the future, we need a somewhat different civil service and somewhat different public administration. We also want to improve our track record in implementation. We feel that there is no problem in general in our decision making. So in simple terms, we can draft and prepare good strategies and action plans, but the implementation is less perfect. the most acute challenge in the public administration sector is within the top level management. It's obvious now in the terms of crisis, where one would think that both the initiative and actually especially implementation algorithms would come from the institutions. And so we feel that there is too much actually expectations from the office of the government or actually even prime minister to set up the operational details for managing the crisis and in general in managing any issues. So there has to be a delegation of not just formal but in real terms of responsibility, authority and action to the institutions and to their management. In terms of data, actually data show that our civil service positions are attractive for the new recruits to the system as a starting point, but after 5 to 7 years, civil service is no longer a very attractive employer. And also we feel that we have a too complicated and complex institutional system, which we want to streamline. Next slide, please. So we want public administration to be a competitive employer. We want also more actually bigger possibilities or more possibilities for actually exchange between public administration and other sectors, broadly speaking, non-governmental and maybe even businesses, so that people could construct their careers not just solely in public administration, but we have other experiences and come back and vice versa. We want to create a strong top management within civil service as a separate corpus. This is as a side note, there was an attempt in 2010 and 11, but it was not a successful one. So this time we hope we could do better. We want improved implementation and efficiency, especially at the agency level, and that would be a point of interest actually to discuss today about the Finnish experience. And we want to simplify existing varieties within the system. So we have just simply too many legal forms of organizations and separate pay systems. So in making them more simple, the principles of pay more simple and understandable, we hope to eliminate this variety, which actually leads to unhealthy competition within civil service, depending on your sort of organization. So the civil service organizations should not be competing between themselves. Next slide, please. And this is the interplay that I alluded to in my first slide. So ideally, actually, so the civil service is the top priority, but it is actually complemented by a review of functions and optimization of institutional setup. Currently, we're looking at the proper ratio between ministries and executive agencies and other agencies, actually, but perhaps once we address this, we could look broader into public sector in general, but we start with public administration sector only. Also, we are making an inventory of or reviewing an inventory. It exists, but it's an imperfect with lots of duplications on public services and administrative services. We want to introduce standards. We want to cost them. I want to see eventually the cost of our public sector matched against the desired standards and see whether there is a gap and how to fund it. Ideally, one would go in the sequence prescribed as noted in the slides. But the political window of opportunity is limited. We feel we have to table the proposal of a reform to the Parliament, as I said, in the concept form. Hopefully late this year or early next one, and if whether Parliament's endorsement will be needed, the window of opportunity is limited to the first half of the next year. So eventually, as perhaps it's normal with any reform, you have an ideal sort of algorithm, but one has to actually face the reality and basically hear the music and dance according to it. So it's simultaneous in all fronts, and perhaps starting with civil service. Next slide, please. And about the preconditions for success, why we think it can be achieved. And I mean, there is a legitimate question, as I mentioned. The world already attempts, most serious attempts for a sort of comprehensive review and introducing the needed elements some 10 years ago, but they failed. So a legitimate question would be why we think we can succeed now. And now we feel that there is a political will, and then informally already we know in the Parliament that there could be a broader endorsement. So it would not just be based on sort of ruling majority and opposition lines. And if we handle it well, we could achieve a bigger consensus. And moreover, we have a feeling also that this time around it's not felt within broader circles of businesses and society. There is a recognition that without good public administration reform, there is no better future. So in essence, it's no longer we talk about public administration as bureaucracy, which is just consuming public money, but we speak of a broader discourse is about public administration and public sector, which is actually providing public goods and value added. The risk factors is actually a continuity. If we manage to achieve that, it is important to continue in the next electoral cycle. That's why a broad endorsement of the Parliament is crucial. We have actually a success story. So we are actually looking for, as I mentioned, for inspiration abroad and in the Nordic countries. But we have our own sort of homegrown success stories, state-owned enterprises, which in many ways, not in everything, but in many ways is actually similar. They face the similar challenges, were successfully reformed, and we are looking also for inspiration about how to run public administration institutions based on these reformed state enterprises. And as I mentioned, I mean, if one wants to do everything in one go, that's basically a recipe to failure. We understand that we sort of, while providing a wider picture, we have to start from some concrete things. So a starting or entry point to the reform, which is being now considered and will be presented, is the top management within civil service, about how to attract better managers, how to retain them, and how to provide them with actually tools and means to reform or to improve their organization. And that's the key entry point. We're seriously looking in further agencyfication, if it's a proper word in English. I put it Nordic style, but let's hear from our Finnish colleagues today. we're thinking that perhaps smaller but more capable ministries dealing exclusively with policy making and stronger agencies which would have perhaps higher executive implementing clout would be the right elements, the right ingredients to begin with. And I think with this I exhausted my presentation. Thank you very much. And once again, I'm very grateful to our Finnish colleagues to agreeing to share with us today. And I'm looking forward to discussion. I saw Vice Minister of Interior participating. She is the owner of these reforms. I saw my colleague, advisor to Prime Minister on civil service reform, also present here. So I hope we can have a good question and answer session after we hear our presentations from our Finnish colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Žeruolis. Yes, before we begin the discussion, we will hear welcome speeches and the presentations from the Finnish colleagues. And I want to now welcome Seppo Mehta, who is Director General at the Prime Minister's Office in Finland. Thank you so much. We're all ears.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kropeit. And thank you very much also to Mr. Žeruolis for your briefing about the situation in Lithuania. As far as I understood, so I suppose that you have very ambitious goals for reforming the public sector in Lithuania. And I hope that the program we have arranged for you so that it will give you some perhaps new ideas to be used also in Lithuania when you are planning for your reforms. Well, the idea in arranging this joint effort and joint discussion goes back to the spring last year, and the spring in this year when I had a meeting with your ambassador, Mr. Kasakevicius. I hope I pronounced it's almost right at least. And then we agreed at the time that this kind of session will be arranged in sometime in autumn. Unfortunately, we needed to postpone it a little bit forward, but I'm very happy that we are now actually implementing this idea to have this session. The topics on our program today, they are based on your proposals that what would be the relevant topics from your point of view, and I hope that the program and the topics we will hear in short time, so that they will be very useful from your point of view. So we will start with the institutional setup of the Finnish governance system and development, and we have a very experienced expert, Mrs. Sirpa Kekkonen, who will give us a presentation on this topic. And then we continue to the structure of the central government and the relationships between ministries and governmental agencies. And there we have asked our colleague from the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Mikko Saarinen, to provide us a presentation on this topic. And the third one, and very important one as well, also regarding your agenda to reform your public sector. It's about rights and obligations of civil servants in Finland, including the pay system we are having at the moment. And there we have our colleagues, Mrs. Susanna Saari, who will provide her presentation regarding on this topic. And the last, but definitely not least, we have a presentation that will be presented by Mrs. Jana Tapanen-Thies, who is an expert on foresight and scenario work. And her presentation is about scenarios in Finland for future generations, and I almost can guarantee that this will be a very good experience and very nice presentation as well. And then it was said by Mrs. Kropeit, so we will have some time to have a discussion, and we would like to hear your comments on the presentations and of course your questions as well. And we will try to do our best to answer to your questions. I would not like to use more time for this. I hope that this event will be very useful for you, and I hope that you also use the floor to raise questions which are relevant to your point of view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mehta. As it was mentioned, we will now have a presentation on institutional setup of the Finnish governance system and its development, and that will be presented by Mrs. Sirpa Kekkonen from the Prime Minister's office. I just want to kindly remind everybody that while listening to all of these presentations, you can write your questions on chat. We will collect them, and at the end of this, after all of the presentations are delivered, when we have the discussion, which everyone is obviously looking forward to, we will use them for that conversation, and we will also be able to ask questions live by raising hands on MS Teams. So the floor, I will give the floor to Mrs. Kekkonen now. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes, hello everybody. Great to be here. My name is Sirpa Kekkonen, and presently working in the Prime Minister's office, and here I've been working since 2003, mainly with the implementation of the government program, the monitoring of its implementation, plus developing the strategic governance system in Finland. Before that, I had quite a long career in the Finnish Ministry of Finance, who is responsible for the overall governance development policies. And I'm pretty sure that I've met some of you in the audience, because I've been, over my career, I've been working a lot with international aspects of governance and also bilateral development projects with countries, so also with Lithuania. So very pleased to be here. My theme is institutional setup of the Finnish governance system. This is a very wide theme, of course, and I have chosen some insights from the Finnish reality of how our governance system, or how I see the cornerstones of our governance system, and what have we been developing, and how, and what have been the focuses of our development work here in Finland. I can only scratch some aspects here, but I hope we will have a chance to discuss later about these in more details. Now, technical help. Okay, well, this summarizes my presentation. It is like in Finland we live in the middle of nature. Nature is very important for us. Also the seasons in Finland are very important because they give us different kinds of frameworks for our thought. We are now, of course, living in the period of autumn. In fact, in Finland we don't have any more these colors. I think that most of the colors from the trees have already gone away, but anyway, okay, I hope we will. Nyt ei ole näy mitään.
Just a second. Sorry.
Aina eskeeppiä nappaa siitä se kuva tuossa asennalla, siitä tulee se kaikki kuvat mukaan. Siihen eskeeppiä se vie siinä tilannassa.
Joo, mä oon tässä
Okay.
Just
Sorry.
a second, I'm sorry, this is me doing the presentation here at the Finnish side.
Yes. So do we?
Joo, nyt voi käyttää niitä
Nuolia, okay. Okay, so in nutshell, some of the characteristics of the Finnish institutional setup for policymaking governance. First of all, we have politically thinking. We have a tradition of coalition majority governments. So this means in the Finnish party structure that in order to have majority in the parliament, the Finnish governments need usually and always in fact several parties that form the coalition. for each government term. This means, from the point of view of governance and administration, that there is a tendency to detailed government programs, because in order to have the majority, we have to have, like, in addition to big parties, we have to have small parties often in the government who have maybe their special objectives, and this has been one of the characteristics of our overall scene. The importance of the government program, which is a coalition agreement that has been negotiated by the parties in the government, is a very important document here in Finland. Its meaning and its importance has been even growing, over the years. With these two elements, that it's an important document, but also sometimes very detailed, there has been an effort to move to a more strategic government program, and we think that very probably the turning point in this effort was in 2015, when the previous government started its office, when the content of the government program changed a lot, as well as the processes to implement it. We have very strong and independent ministries, even though relatively small, and my colleague Mikko will, after me, go further to the details concerning the role of the ministries, their size, their relationship with the subordinate agencies, and so on. So I won't go into that, but the independence of ministries is kind of a challenge, because it may and often does present an obstacle to coordination and horizontal policy making. And particularly this is seen, of course, in the resource allocation processes. But we have been making a lot of efforts to overcome this challenge. The Prime Minister's office in Finland is, if we look at globally, it's relatively weak in coordination functions, but it has been strengthened little by little, step by step, in terms of having the role of keeping up the overall picture of where we are in the public governance. Of course, the relationship between the Ministry of Finance and Prime Minister's office is very important, and it's moving more towards a coordinated manner of action. We have, of course, the structure where we have the central administration, we have regional administration, local administration, and even if we have very quite strong central agencies, I think that nowadays, with the many years of decentralization efforts in Finland, many of the implementation of the government's goals and the production and provision of public services takes place at the local and regional level. Well, if we think about the mental scenery in Finland, one could say that the Finns are known as being quite pragmatic, also rational. We don't have like big fights and shoutings in the parliament as we see in some countries, even in Europe. We are said to be consensus-seeking people, and sometimes it may mean also risk-avoiding, which is I put here in a question mark, because these are, of course, very personal assessments by me. Of course, the big picture in Finland follows what has been the big line of development in all over in our types of public administration systems. So, of course, we started with the traditional public administration, where there were certain rules and certain values which led the functioning, importance of hierarchies, authority, rule of law, and so on. But the most important to understand from the perspective of today is that there is a difference between today's thinking and earlier thinking, in the sense that in the traditional public administration phase, the public administration was seen as a system in itself, and it was seen much separate from politics. And we have come now through the so-called new public management reform to today's public governance phase of development, where we turn our view from inside the public administration system as itself more towards how should we develop our governance in order to meet the needs of the society, and particularly the systemic changes that we're facing. This is just a very brief picture of the government's decision making, just pointing out that in addition to the ministries and to the governmental level, political level decision making, we have in between, we have 4 constitutionally required cabinet committees whose secretariats are very important, and of course these are served by the ministries and their preparation. If in the traditional public administration phase of development there was a lot of effort to redefine the structures, administrative structures, and also the issue of vertical steering from the center to the regions and local levels have been strongly on the agenda. But more and more over the recent decades in Finland, we have been focusing on developing steering, what we call steering systems and steering processes. Steering is a very Nordic concept. We can also say that we can also talk about policy making. Policy making, in a way, is equivalent, much used in the Anglo-Saxon countries, but we talk about the same thing. How do we ensure through our processes that politically set objectives are implemented at all levels of administration? These central strategic processes that we have is of course the government program implementation and monitoring system, the budget and midterm fiscal framework process, and in something like in the 90s, we started talking about information steering in addition to these 2 previously mentioned steering systems, which is like affecting the implementation of policies through different kinds of information provision. Performance budgeting and management were introduced in Finland in the 1990s. It's more like internal management process which underlines accountability for results, as we all know, and it is of course it complements the government program, implementation program in practice, and turns the politically set priorities into implementative issues that can be implemented. In Finland, working across ministerial silos has been a long-term endeavor. It's still a problem, even if we have done a lot to overcome the silo system. Behind the aim at more horizontal policy making are very simple things. For long, we felt that there is too much overlapping of tasks between different ministerial sectors, agencies. There's also inefficient use of public resources, kind of wasting money on duplicating things, and also maybe introducing contradictory outcomes and proposals for the politicians. Nowadays we talk a lot about sub-optimizing, which is threatening the aim at at fulfilling broader social objectives. And from the political point of view, two strong silos, they end up with ineffective policies, which has raised also the interest of political level for the governance reforms. We have had many ways to tackle the problem of two strong silos. At certain point, there was an attempt to strengthen the steering from the center. We had during two government terms, we had so-called horizontal policy programs that the government was implementing. That was one attempt to overcome silos. And the latest developments have been based on the process concerning the government program and its monitoring. I will say a couple of words about that a little further. Just very briefly, the recent milestones in the Finnish public governance development. We introduced in 2003 this so-called program management system with those horizontal policy programs I mentioned. In between that and today, we have had a lot of international analysis of our system and the needs to develop it. The OECD has made twice a governance review on Finland, first in 2010 and the other one in 2015, which was elaborated together with Estonia. It concerned two countries at the same time, which was historical for the OECD itself. We have had international assessment projects like the one that is called Governments for the Future, which operated in 2011 to 2013. Then we have had these internal Finnish development projects, one of which I mentioned this so-called OHRA project from 2013 and 2015, which ended up with the move to the strategic government program. OHRA acronym comes from the words to steer and to report. We have just even recently we have been following the overall view or insights and to the needs for development. And I mentioned an important research project that we just complemented last year, Steering 2020, which dealt with the present and future development needs. At the moment, we are involved with an OECD project which is called Anticipatory Innovation Governance. It is an EU-financed effort to build a new model for governance that would be based on anticipatory innovation, anticipatory view and innovative approach. I stop here and we can come back to questions. There are many aspects that one would like to widen the view on, but just summarizing very briefly our experiences of where we started and how did we end up here. For one thing is that I think it's important to in all the governance efforts to clarify the ultimate objective and the big picture. Anyway, the role of the government is to serve better the society. I like this British expression, serving. The Brits talk about civil service, and I mean, yes, public service or civil service, and I think it's a very good word to describe the role of administration. In Finland, we feel that it's very useful to refer to international frameworks, be in active contact with other countries, and this is why we are very happy for this occasion as well with you in Lithuania, because we have also used the same method talking to other countries, exchanging experiences, trying to get innovations and best practices from other countries, and the overall efforts like OECD. We think that learning from past efforts of reforming is very important. We have a tendency of assessing after every reform or step in reform to assess what has worked and trying to identify gaps and needs for further development. And last but not least, in Finland, we believe a lot in open discussions, communicating, and it's very important in the governance development how we communicate with politicians, we experts or administrative civil servants. How do we communicate with the politicians, and including that our messages concerning these very complex and complicated issues is very important to be sharp enough, interesting enough for the politicians. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It is it's good that you reminded that the aim of public governance is eventually serving the people. We'll go back to this point later in the discussion, but I would now like to invite the speaker from the Ministry of Finance to speak about the structure of central government, ministries and government agencies, and that will be Mr. Mikko Saarinen. Thank you for joining us here, and the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to tell you, I would say, a few key points and a few key numbers maybe about the structure of central government in Finland. I'm Mikko Saarinen from Ministry of Finance, and my tasks concern mainly the structural issues regarding the agencies and also steering systems, especially when it comes to performance management. But I'll try to get my presentation for you. Just a moment. I hope you all can see it now. So about the structure of central government, first of all, about the ministries and the size of them. Well, the Finnish government consists of 12 ministries, and the Prime Minister's office is one of them. And according to the Constitution of Finland, each ministry as itself is within its administrative branch is responsible for the preparation of matters to be considered by the government and for the appropriate functioning of administration. And this concerns especially the steering of the whole branch of the ministry, and includes, of course, agencies also. And each ministry is headed by a minister, of course. And here you can see the size of the ministries if we look at through the number of personnel through that viewpoint. And there are few things that I think need more explaining. One is the fact that many of the administrative services of the ministries, like facilities and some in-house services, or actually quite many of them, and ICT services, etc., are centrally provided by the Prime Minister's office in Finland. And this actually explains the large number of personnel in the Prime Minister's office, as you can see there. And the other thing is that Finland's missions abroad are not independent agencies from the ministry, but fall directly under the organization of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And this explains in turn the large number of personnel employed by this particular ministry. But otherwise, the tasks of the respective ministries are quite similar actually, and as you can see, the number of personnel also, and there we have this as a kind of a data service. It's called in Finnish tutkihallintoa.fi, or in English exploreadministration.fi. And there you can find some additional information. Unfortunately, some only in Finnish, but some partly in English as well. And especially on the issues of how many agencies we have, what are their personnel, and what are the euros they use. But about the size of the actual administrative branches of the ministries, and so the government in whole, here are a couple of pictures that bring that show the overall picture of this viewpoint, and measured by the number of personnel, you can see there that by far the administrative branches of Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Defense are the largest. And this also shows the one key point that about, I would say, about 40% of the personnel of the Finnish government and the branches are concerned with the inner security or the defense forces. So about 40% of the government personnel are somehow concerned with tasks regarding these two fields, and that means, of course, police and defense forces and so forth. And when we look at the same questions from the monetary side through the euros, you can see that the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Social Affairs and Health dominate there, and but this can be attributed to central government transfers to local government when we look at the Ministry of Finance, and when we look at the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, it's the big sums are concerned with social security, and this explains this picture. And in the draft budget of 2022, the appropriations totaled about 64.8 billion all in all, and of this, the central government annual actual operating expenditure amounts to about 13 billion, and operating revenue to around 4 billion. Then about roles and responsibilities of the ministries and the government agencies, in just a few key points. As you can see, from the number of employees, the ministries in Finland, I think, are actually fairly small units, fairly small organizations. And when we speak very generally, their core tasks are actually quite limited. They are only law drafting, strategic guidelines, guidance or steering or policy making, as Sirpa said, in their respective administrative branches. And this includes, of course, budgeting, and then, of course, international ministerial cooperation, including cooperation within the EU. And as a rule of thumb, the government's public administrative duties are performed by agencies which are established under the government. And especially when they involve significant exercise of public powers, they can only be delegated to public authorities, which means agencies. And the duties of these are, of course, laid out by law, and they are very independent in their regulatory decision making, of course. And other entities also exist, And these include funds and foundations and state-owned enterprises, but they still the agency form is the main form in which the government functions are performed. But the tasks may have been organized into a company form, especially if they do not involve the exercise of public authority. And in addition, we have a few agencies such as the National Audit Office operating directly under the Parliament, and also the Social Insurance Institution of Finland, which is a very big and significant agency, actually is also directly under the Parliament's control. And all in all, the number of personnel employed in Finnish central government is approximately 78,000. And at least when one looks at the Nordic comparison, this is a relatively small number. And when we look at the history, in the early 1990s, the actual central government employed more than 200,000 people. But as a result of corporatization and operational efficiency enhancement, the number has decreased quite significantly, as you can see. And it is clear that the majority of public sector employees, about 420,000 people, are employed by self-governing municipalities, and also joint municipal authorities are included in this number. But then a few words, more specific words about how the agencies are funded from the state budget, actually. And the short answer to this question would be that the annual state budget approved by Parliament, in this document, each agency is allocated a budget appropriation, and also operating revenue is allocated or is taken into account in this document, and these together make up the agency's funding. But however, if we take a slightly broader perspective and the concept and process of performance management, we can take a more specific look about this. And here we have 4 important documents. We have the government program, which lays down, I would say, the main policy making and the main steering initiatives to agencies, of course, especially the ministries, but they go through ministries also to the agencies. Then we have the 4-year rolling general government fiscal plan, and it determines the agency's spending limits, basically, as part of the other central government financial planning and fiscal policy. And in practice, this agency-specific financial framework is based on the principle of continuity, and the previous plan sets the reference level, and against which the new and discontinued tasks and efficiency and productivity targets and so forth are compared and taken into account. And very important points are, of course, each government's first general government fiscal plan and the mid-term policy review of this plan, and they play a key role in the planning cycle. Then we have the actual annual budget, which I already mentioned, in which Parliament determines the actual appropriation that are binding on each agency for the budget year. And this has basically the same guideline for the preparations as the general government fiscal plan. So all changes in tasks and objectives are taken into account in the budget. And but the same time, this document sets the preliminary key targets for the agency's effectiveness and operational performance, and against these allocated appropriations. So this is where the performance management point of view comes into play, and also when the budgeting the appropriation, the revenue from the agency's operations is recorded as net, and fees are charged for services must correspond to the actual costs incurred. And after this third step, there's still the fourth one. And so after the Parliament has approved the budget, each ministry must, by law, without delay, confirm the preliminary objectives set in the budget for effectiveness and operational performance. And this is actually done by signing a performance agreement by the ministry and the agency in question. And these are clearly wider in scope than these preliminary objectives in the annual budget, but by nature still strategic documents. So rather than describing all the agency's activities, these agreements try to set out strategic goals from the perspective of materiality and change above all. And as a rule, these agreements are also made for 4 years and updated on a rolling basis each year, so that there should be always a 4-year sort of perspective and view with the also for the ministry and for the agency on which are the main objectives for the agency. And a more thorough review of these performance agreements is always carried out when a new government begins its work, so that the government program is also so it's ensured that the government program is reflected in these performance agreements. But I think that wraps up my presentation. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will move to the rights and obligations of a civil servant in Finland, the pay systems in the Finnish state as well. This will be delivered by Mrs. Susanna Sari of the Prime Minister's office. We can see you. Hopefully in a second we will see your screen as well. Thank you so much for joining. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Should I, Hanna, show it from here, the presentation?
Hi, Susanna, this is Seppo here. It's okay if you show the presentation by yourself, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
One moment. Can you see it now?
We can see your screen. Yes.
Yes, I'll put it in the show. No. Okay. Good morning, and nice to be here today with you. My name is Susanna Sari, and I work in the Prime Minister's office in HR unit. And mainly I work with pay system questions and also relationship issues for the people in the office, and also other HR issues. Today, I'm concentrating on the rights and obligations of civil servants in Finland. And you were also interested in the payroll system in Finland, so we are also going to discuss about that too. Here you can see some legislation on civil servants. In Finland, we have a Civil Service Act. The law contains aspects on how a post of a civil servant can be created, abolished, transferred, or modified. It contains also sections defining the job vacancy and what the requirements are for certain posts in government. There are also duties of public authorities and officials, and issues like leave of absence from the office or regulation for that. And there are also rules for in what circumstances and how the employment relationship can be terminated. Then we have also this state collective labor agreement, which is very central. What could I say? Agreement between the labor market and the employer. It's a very important tool because we have jointly agreed this agreement with these different parts. And also you can see here we have this Working Time Act, Annual Leave Act, and then also a very important Act on Equality between Men and Women, a Non-Discrimination Act, and also, of course, legislation on occupational health and safety, and then differently or separately safety at work regulations. Then some general obligations of the authority and the official. These are also based on the acts that I mentioned before. The employer's right of direction includes the right to determine the work tasks and workplace, and also the placement of working hours. Of course, we have the Working Time Act, but this the employer can then decide in which realm you need to work. What other obligations the employer have is, for example, employer's responsibility to ensure safety at work and ensure adequate training for the job. Then from the other point of view, the official or the civil servant must carry out his or her duties properly and without delay. He or she must comply with the rules of work management and supervision. And the Act says also that the official shall conduct himself in a manner in appropriate position and duties. Okay, well, according to the regulation, there is also what could I say? Official's duty on confidentiality. It's much stronger than the confidentiality duty for a person who is not a civil servant. Provisions on the maintenance of a secondary activity. Yes, it means that a civil servant must inform the employer if he or she is having another job alongside the job in the state agency. The next step here is the yes, if an official who fails to or neglects to comply with his or her official duties, he or she may be giving a written warning, And this has also been said in the Civil Servant Act. And in general, if we consider the termination of a relationship in an office, it can be said that the protection for civil servants is broader than the people who are not in the civil servant relationship. Okay, then a few words about the pay system in the Finnish state. Okay, I tried to gather some information on the basis what you Lithuanian colleagues wanted to hear about. Here in my presentation, there's no specific statistics about this, but in general, we can say that the salaries in ministries are often slightly higher than in sectoral agencies. There are also different levels of salaries between the ministries. And there has been a discussion about a common pay system for ministries or even for the entire state. But the discussion is now maybe on hold. There are also groups that have been thinking about this possibility, but at the moment has been discussed that the development would be a very challenging work. And like earlier I said about the other regulations on civil servants, so also this pay system will be set out in a detailed collective agreement together with the staff associations. The state pay system, the similar kind of rules are like all over the state, but this concerns also ministries. The pay system consists of a job or task specific and a personal salary component. And the salary component per post is determined according to the complexity of the post. And there can be different or many levels of complexity, maybe from 14 to 18, and it varies from agency to another. And how you can get those civil servant posts to this system? So there are a kind of map or assessment map which you use, and you have there this task description sheet where you can see the different views to that specific task. And then with certain points, you can go, or the task is leaded to a certain level. And then this personal salary component, there are these annual discussions, like I wrote here, performance appraisal interview. Generally, it's like between December January, and you have this, at the same time you look back and how did the year go, and then you also check the new goals, and then at the same time discuss about this performance for this person. And the most common factors that are assessed in the interview are, for example, competence, efficiency, cooperation, interaction skills, and leadership skills. And there are different kind of scales. The most common is maybe from 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, and the 5 is the best score in the discussion. And the employer or the manager then takes the scale further to the bigger manager, who decides the last decision. Well, the personal salary component may not exceed 50% of the job-specific salary component, and most commonly, I could say it's between 20 to 25%. And this also depends on the agency or ministry, because we have different pay systems. And the new civil servant in the beginning has usually lower personal salary component. And then just few words about the private sector salaries. I guess this is quite similar that you have. In the private sector in Finland, staff benefits can often be more extensive than in the public sector, like car, telephone, healthcare, maybe larger. And an extra performance pay is more commonly used in the private sector. For example, in the higher levels of manager posts. And then there are also in private sector there's a commission-based salary. For example, sales posts. Something that's there's been decided a percent of the results that you can get in the end of the year. And then at the private sector, there are often, or these reward or metrics are often linked to quantitative outputs. Of course, like competence or these interaction skills are also important, but maybe they don't have this similar effect on the salary. And also on average, the government wages or state wages are slightly lower than in the private sector, especially in expert vacancies, but this often depends on the sector. And this, I think, was that I was going to tell you about, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your presentation. There are specific questions coming in, but we will address them after this last presentation is done. And last but not least, I would like to present scenarios on Finland for future generations. That will be presented by Mrs. Joanna Tapainen, please. Prime Minister's Office. I hope I pronounced your name at least partly correctly, and we can see you now. We thank you for joining us, and we are eager to hear what you have to say.
Yes, thank you so much. Very happy to be here today. I'll be presenting. I just saw that we are a little bit already late at the moment, so I'll try to be very brief. So Finland has a track record in creating future-oriented structures of decision-making. We have a very broad consensus for the need for foresight and considerable acceptance within various levels of the government, and openness and trust are key. And co-creation, collaboration, participation are very central to the way we work. And our outcomes are available for a wider public debate, electoral discussions, and also for policy development. We invest continuously in our capacities and capabilities, and now what I'll be presenting in a little bit of the background of sort of the context within which we do foresight, and then a little bit digging deeper into this process where which we have changed in the last 1.5 years. So we are very happy to be part of this newly established EU-wide foresight network, and we are very much looking forward to the increased collaboration between the member states. The Parliamentary Committee for the Future that has been established in 1993, and the Government Foresight Group that was founded in 2015, and the Government Foresight Group is the advisory group to advance foresight activities and link foresight better to decision-making processes. The Ministerial Foresight Panel, it coordinates the government's joint foresight work and serves as a cooperation network for the ministries in the work related to, for example, the preparation of the government report on the future, but also the ministerial future reviews. The National Foresight Network, it's open to all that work with and are interested in foresight, and the purpose is to foster public discussion on futures issues. Since 2003, all ministries develop future reviews. Also, once every electoral period, the reviews come out before the elections, and they provide information for the elections and to the government formation negotiations. The purpose is to assess situation and developments in society and examine issues for political decision making. In Finland, sort of a little bit broader context is still that future studies is an established field in Finland. Already in 1980, the government's Central Board of Research Councils recommended to establish the Finnish Society of Future Studies. And now the latest development is that futures literacy is in our core curriculum in schools, and it's taught under multiliteracy. Another concrete example is the National Skills Anticipation Forum, which produces information on the competencies, skills, and educational needs of working life in the future. So what we have done now is to remodel the government report on the future. The government report has been submitted since 1993, once in the election term, looking at the long-term issues. And this forms the government report on the future, forms the future's dialogue between the government and the parliament. And the aim is to identify important issues for decision making that requires special attention in the future. And it's opening of the debate for the coming years. In accordance with the Committee on the Future, the Parliamentary Committee of the Future, the report will be presented to Parliament in 2 parts in order to promote dialogue and inclusion, but also increase the impact. The government develops scenarios taking into account the uncertainty of the global environment to support preparedness. And the first part of the report is based on joint foresight by all ministries of Finland. So one big change is that we are now moving more into this big picture thinking instead of one topic in this government report on the future. And the complexity of the operating environment also requires us to take a more comprehensive approach. So what we have done is move from one theme to overall big picture. So previous reports on the future have dealt with, for example, demographics or the future work. And I'll show some examples of some issues what we have dealt with in this this report. We have moved from continuity thinking to dealing with uncertainty and complexity, and this is sort of that we have covered with the scenarios. Previously, the government reports on the future have been outsourced to researchers or universities, and now we have done it ourselves. It has been a very steep learning curve, but of course, at the same time, it has required a greater investment of resources. It has increased the foresight capacity of the state administration, but yes, it has been a learning process. So very central to the way we have done this time is co-creation, cooperation, and participation. So all ministries, but also outside experts, researchers, the National Foresight Network, and also citizens have been participating in the work. And with this new forward-looking statement procedure, we have pushed for anticipatory governance that Sirpa was also mentioning before. We have this whole of government approach, phenomena orientation, interactivity, dialogue, deliberation, and inclusion. So we have had sort of a core group, the Prime Minister's Office and the Ministerial Foresight Panel, and the strategic foresight team in the Prime Minister's Office have been the key working group for the first part. We've also had a steering group of state secretaries, also taking into account the government pledges for new kind of interaction and knowledge-based policy making, and also other pledges of the government program about policy reform. So here you can also already see the 50 dialogues on the future. We have had citizen dialogues throughout the process in different parts. We've had outside experts to help us sort of deliver or develop hypotheses into the future. The Ministerial Foresight Panel, it has a representative of each of the ministry, and in addition, it has been dealt with in all ministries and administrative branches quite substantially. We've had the National Foresight Network also included, and this advisory group, the Government Foresight Group. Regarding the scenarios, I think what is important to communicate to decision makers what scenarios are. So sort of what we can achieve with doing scenarios. So this is something that the Parliament required from us, because the wording is sort of we have to develop scenarios that include the developments in the international operating environment for preparedness purposes. And but of course, scenario work, when we deal with certainties or sort of trends, mega trends type of information, it very easily falls into the responsibility of a certain ministry or group of ministries. But when we move into scenario work, it's sort of it's something that is uniquely new, and we have to develop our ways to have this kind of cross-governmental futures dialogue to be able to create these kind of pictures of the future. And of course, there is often this kind of understanding that scenarios try to depict what is likely to happen. But what we have tried to communicate that it's not about likeliness or sort of this kind of guessing the future right, but really they are possible developments, and that we focus on these uncertainties. So we I don't know if you see this last part, but it has been an extensive work in the last 1.5 years. We've done a substantial environmental analysis. We have had teams of ministries to to identify the key drivers impacting the future of Finland. So in one topic we had 3 ministries. That was the smallest amount of ministries jointly describing a driver of change. And in the one where we had the most participation was 8 ministries. So that sort of shows that there are a lot of issues that fall under the sort of the sphere of many of these 12 ministries. So if 8 out of 12 feel that they want to be part of that, it shows that we have some, issues that are more in nature, sort of cross-governmental. We've had these developments of these hypotheses of the key uncertainties. We tried how to deal with uncertainty. That is something where we certainly need to develop our abilities. And then going into these scenario logics, scenario narratives, roadmaps, implications, preparedness, must-win battles, and so we've had extensive work in each of these steps, and in each of the steps we've done work in each of the ministry, but also this cross-governmental work, and also included outside experts. Here are some identified drivers for change. So societal, technological, economic, environmental, and political drivers for change. And also in the scenarios, so we started with these, we described what these are in this cross-governmental collaboration, where this ministerial foresight panel was the sort of the key working group, and these have been substantially commented and been circulating in all of the ministries, so that we really get that whole of government point of view for each of these topics. And also when we've from these identified the critical uncertainties and then developed these hypotheses, we've tried to, even though they sort of fall into the responsibility of certain ministries, that we all the time have this whole of government outlook in these. So I'm not going to be going through all of these, but you can sort of see the topics that have been in discussion cross-governmentally in the last 1.5 years. So we've had this collaboration, co-creation, participation, all 12 ministries, the ministerial foresight panel. We've had these citizen dialogues, 50 dialogues, and in each we had about 10% each. Like I said, this national foresight community, researchers, experts, the government foresight group, the government in sort of the evening sessions, and then we've had this steering group. The whole work was done remotely due to pandemic. We did not have one single meeting where we met in person, and I think this is also a testimony to sort of even though we're developing our ways, there is a certain fundament we can build on that also functions in a state of pandemic. So expert workshops, cross-governmental workshops in all ministries, and the citizen future dialogues, and then we've had these certain events. I tried to picture sort of, so when we talk about cross-governmental collaboration, sort of what is exactly sort of these instances that what we have been having these discussions. So the core group is this ministerial foresight panel, and sort of the strategic foresight group, the strategic foresight team in the Prime Minister's office. We've had all ministries that have been commenting, but also having workshops, and so in each of these steps of the scenario work, we've had ministry workshops, we've had cross-governmental workshops, but also then when we have done those outputs, when they're ready, then they always have gone into a quite wide circulation for commenting. We've had the government foresight group, which is chaired by the State Secretary of the Prime Minister. We had the steering committee of the government report on the future. Also, that's consisting of the state secretaries. It's chaired by the state secretary. It has been discussed in all ministries, executive boards, discussed with the permanent state secretaries, discussed with the state secretaries, and sort of the path forward is what we are yet to go through is the government evening session. From there it goes to the sorry, there misses one. So the government plenary session happens before the parliamentary plenary session. Then it goes to the parliamentary committee for the future for hearings. And then the parliament prepares their futures report. And that then includes the resolutions. And then it goes back to the parliament plenary session. And what happens then is that from there, when it's decided, the government again in each of their annual reports is reporting back how we have then done those resolutions. So we have to report in our annual reporting what has been done with the resolutions that the Parliament has said. So here about these futures dialogues with citizens. And here the aim was especially to include people who normally wouldn't participate, and this has served as an input also for the government report on the future. And the partners and participants include, for example, several universities, upper secondary schools, vocational schools, several cities, municipalities, parishes, and so on and so forth. But that has been a very wonderful experience for us. And then in the report, what we tried to do is to bring these two together. And what we can say is kind of the future is already here. I think I'm going to stop here. I hope that gave a glimpse of the work we do and how we have done it in this cross-governmental collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have approximately half an hour now for discussions because questions kept coming in, and thank you everybody for that. And I will try to address them now and in the order of how they were asked. I think it will also correspond to which speaker I will address the question to. I hope all of the speakers are still with us. Independence of ministries as not prone to coordination. Does it originate from ministers belonging to different coalition parties or from a culture of civil servants? That's the question. I would say that would go to Mrs. Sirpa Kekkonen. I hope she's still with us.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. There is a little bit of an echo, but if you could try to speak a little longer, maybe the echo is fading eventually.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so you hear me now also?
We can hear you perfectly well.
Yeah, okay. So you asked about the state secretaries. They are formally civil servants. They are not career civil servants. They're chosen by the minister who they serve, and in that sense they are political. They come always from the same party as the minister whom they serve, and so they are, one could say that they are political appointees. Formally though, they are civil servants in terms of the, like all the payroll and such things, but they are definitely political appointees. Then you
Yes.
Sorry? No, go on.
I just wanted to ask if you could comment on linkages also between PMO, governmental program, and MOF, medium-term budget.
Maybe My colleague Seppo, do you want to? Yes, Seppo will talk about that.
Thank you.
This one.
Se on ehkä helpompaa, jos menen tuolta kommentoimaan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can see you, and I think we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, we have too many laptops and too many machines here, so that it makes it a little bit difficult. But referring to the question that what is the relationship between the Ministry of Finance and the budgetary process and then the government program, so I would say that we have a kind of two two maps based on different logic, so to say. And where the budget is based on the structural system we are having, so that each of the ministries, we are having 12 ministries altogether. Each of the ministries, they have their own budget frame, which they then are using in a more planning in a more explicit way, so that we have 12 ministries in line actually when we speak about the budgeting. And then we have many government program which is based on the so-called phenomenon, so it's systemic views on the societal challenges and so forth. So that, and we have 7 of those so-called strategic themes, which are included in the government program. So there's a kind of a there's not the, so to say, the perfect match between the government program content-based speaking and the budget. But then again, from the management point of view, so the government has set 7 different ministerial groups, each one of them being responsible for the strategic themes. And within those ministerial groups, so we have all the respective ministries who have something to contribute to the strategic theme in question. So this is the way we are trying to put these together in a way that the money follows the content more or less. So that this is the situation we are having today, and we believe that these kind of systemic views, when preparing the next government program, so they will be there perhaps even more than they have been before, because the world is becoming more systemic in a sense, and that's why I think that we will, and I hope actually in some of these days that we will see also kind of a budgets which are based on the same logic, so that we have the content in the government program, and then we have, let's say, the money for implementing those things that we are decided in the government program. Thank you.
We have a very specific request to name 5 main examples which could illustrate the gap between central and local administrations. I was wondering if Mrs. Kekkonen would take that, or you would appoint someone else.
Yes, hello. I can start, and then maybe Mikko could also add something to this. First, I have to ask, what does the person who put the question mean with gap?
We do not have a very specific explanation, but I think that was the exact wording in the presentation, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, it's from the presentation.
Yeah, in the presentation, I think I was referring to the gap in terms of like coordination. If it's not really a gap, but I mean, the differences or the challenges when you want to have from the center of government, you want to have holistic coordinated policies, and then the policies are implemented at regional levels and local levels, which is multiple actors. So there's a risk, or there's a potential that something that is steered from the center is not kind of implemented in the regions and in the local levels in the way the government would prefer it to be. But I must say that in the Finnish context, the municipalities are autonomous. So that's according to our constitution. The municipalities, through the legislation, when they're given a certain mandate, they're sovereign in using that mandate. They can implement the way they wish at the local level. We are the regional level is complex in Finland because we are in the middle of a historically huge reform of our regional administration. So some of the tasks which used to be at the municipal level, they will be transferred to what we call welfare regions. So for all these social and health services will be in the hands of the regional areas, whereas the education, for instance, the teaching, schools, all that will stay in the municipalities. And this is a potential for a gap, if you like, because like at the central level, at the ministerial level and the government level, there are policies which concern, for instance, children. But then the implementation of those strategic lines, policies are implemented in various regions and even a big number of municipalities. Municipalities responsible for education and the regions responsible for social and health services. So that maybe illustrates to you a potential of a gap. But at the moment we are in a very turbulent situation concerning the regional administration because we will have the first regional elections, in fact, in January, and the system is very brand new, so we don't have any experiences of it yet. I hope this somehow answered your question.
I think we have Mr. Vitas Vasilauskas raising his hand, and he was originally the one who asked this very question. So let's see what he has to add.
Yes, thank you, Živile. So I would like to add, do you see any gaps in a sphere of, for example, expertise or efficiency? What is your evaluation in those two spheres? In comparison, I mean, central administration versus local administration. Okay.
I don't know. I don't think there are any kind of systematic research on this or comparisons, but there is a quite a generally shared view that in many respects the municipal, local and regional levels, they do things which we would like to do in the central government, even better, but of course in their restricted constituency. But for instance, foresight, which our colleague Jana talked about, there is a feeling and a sense understanding that sometimes the foresight activities are much more developed at the regional and local level than they are at the central level. Another interesting aspect, of course, when we talk about these vertical relationships between levels of administration is, of course, how to what extent can they coordinate within each level. And as I put a lot of emphasis in my presentation to the challenges of coordination and holistic view, phenomenon-based view on policies at the central level. Now, the question is, and some people believe that this horizontality, so-called horizontality or coordination works better, at the local and regional levels. But it's not quite sure. This is another area where we would need some more research, because on the other hand, the party politics are sometimes much more severe and violent, if you want, the controversies between parties at the local level. But of course they deal with very different things as the central government, because they deal with very concrete things related to people's interests. But I don't know if Mikko or Seppo would like to add, but this is what we think about in terms of the new kind of focuses that we have in the in the governance that sometimes there are issues which are better taken care by the local authorities.
Thank you so much. The next question will be to me. Mr. Gerolis is raising his hand. Yes.
I just wanted to follow up very briefly, if I may, on the same topic. So are the civil servants at the local level governed by the same law and the same principles of pay and other elements, or is it a separate? Because there was no mentioning of this local and regional level. Yes, we are aware that you are going into this joint whatever management. And then we actually understand we even asked for technical assistance with the European Commission to study your example. So we are successful, we'll be cooperating in that area. But what about pay and the status of the employees? I understood from you that you regard the competence or the skills are actually quite advanced, at least on par with the central government, and in some areas maybe even better.
Yes. There's a separate legislation concerning the municipal administration and the including the role and responsibilities, etc., concerning the municipal authorities and public servants working there. So it's separate. It's different from the state. But I think that there has been some harmonization of the principles over the times. But I want to correct also that I didn't mean, with my earlier comment, I didn't mean that the competencies, as you can measure them, competencies or educational backgrounds or so on are better at the local level. It's just that it's more flexible system to adapt new ways of, like, let's say, management or implementing certain things which we try to push from the center as general principles. But I wouldn't say that it's not really the difference in the competencies in the normal use of the word.
Thank you so much. I think we can now invite Mikko Saarinen on stage, because there are several questions that we can address to him. For example, what about the staff of agencies? Is CEO and the team civil servants? What is the procedure for selecting civil servants, centralized or decentralized? Is the selection process different for CEOs, top level management? And how different is legal regulation of employment relations between the Civil Service Act and the Finnish Labor Code or similar legislation that you have? So that's probably to Mikko Saarinen and maybe some of them to Susanna Sari. If you could take those, please, we will gladly hear the answers.
Yes, thank you for the questions, and regards for the first one. What about the staff of the agencies, and is the CEO and the team civil servants? Well, the clear answer would basically be that they are, of course, because they are exercising significant public powers. So they are civil servants. However, it is also possible to be working under an employment contract in an agency if your tasks don't include the exercise of significant public powers. But as was pointed out in my presentations, these tasks which don't involve the actual exercise of public power, they've been mostly transferred out from the agencies to corporations and so forth. So in the actual central government agents, we basically have only tasks that include this exercise of significant public powers. So they are civil servants in practice. So, and about this selection procedure, is it centralized or decentralized? And is it different for CEOs or top-level manager? I would maybe the short answer would be that it is both, but it's mostly decentralized. So the organization that recruits actually and decides on the civil servants that work under it, basically. And the law lays down the general guidelines and process for each organization. Each organization has to follow. Each agency and ministry has to follow. These are stipulated in law. But however, the government plenary session decides on the most significant appointments. This concerns particularly ministries, certain civil servants. In ministry, actually, quite many of those are appointed by the government plenary session, and also the agency heads or CEOs, if you will, are mostly appointed by the plenary session. And this last one, I think I must pass on to a colleague who's maybe some colleague of ours, if she or he is better equipped to answer that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone who could comment on the convergence between the Civil Service Act and the Finnish Labour Code or the equivalent of it?
Yeah, this is Seppo. I could give a comment on this one because I believe that Susanna Saari, she had to left already to do other things. So, but I would say that these two acts, they have they have become more and more similar to each other with each other, so that it is not that easy to do kind of a, what is the irtisanominen, what is the dismissal, yeah. So that on the public sector and in the government, so it's a bit more difficult, to dismiss some of the people working in the public sector. But there are more, let's say, opportunities to do that as well. But of course, you need to have some kind of evidence also, which kind of legitimize in a sense the dismissal. So that, yeah.
Yeah. I could just add one word. Neither of us is an expert.
She's a lawyer, so I'm just not a lawyer. So.
But neither of us is an expert on these matters. Let's be honest. But I think that of course the difference is that the public civil servants, they are of course fulfilling public duties, and that makes the biggest difference, I think, because of course if you are you are using public resources, you're using public power, basically. You have also other, certain obligations and certain requirements, which are different from, the private sector system. But as Seppo said, I think the most important is that they're getting closer and closer to each other and resembling each other.
Just to follow up on that question, I wanted to ask about the reputation of civil servants. What would you say it is in Finland? Your colleague has mentioned all of the salary differences and technical details as well. But for example, in Lithuania, sometimes public servants and civil servants are seen as people who do not work too hard. They get salaries that are probably not as high, but they're doing their job, and they are sitting in this very comfortable chair for a long time. And I'm not meaning to offend anyone, but sometimes the general public has that view and has that sees the employees of the public sector like that. What about the reputation of such employees in Finland?
I would say that in general, the reputation is pretty good, actually. And we have a kind of an evidence on that one as well, because we have applied a so-called citizens pulse for this past 1.5 year due to the corona pandemic, and those analyses they tell us that the citizens actually they have a trust on civil servants. But then again, you can also see discussions on the political level between the parties, that some of the party would say that, well, we need to kick off, let's say, 50% of the civil servants, and then we need to, replace them with the private sector services and so forth. But this is a kind of a politics, more or less, and we have differences between different parties, that how do they see the role and the size of the public sector, which I suppose is familiar to you as well. But in general, I would say that in Finland, so the people have a trust on civil servants. But I can imagine so that the examples you just said that we have that kind of discussion as well in different parts of Finland. So, but I would say that doesn't represent, let's say, the majority of the people who think that way. At least when you for some reason you need to go to the hospital or so forth, so the people's eye opens often actually that, well, this functions actually very well, and they're very thankful also for those kinds of services. Same applies with education and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We still have questions about money and salaries, but since Ms. Sari is not with us and our time is running low, I think for now we will leave them for private discussions, and let me go to a different question. For example, do you have a special law regulating the legal status of agencies, status of employees working in it, and the model of agencies implemented only at the governmental level, or Finland has any other levels in the field of agencyization? Who would be willing to take that?
Could you please roll the, let's say, so that we can see the question, because it was a bit long one, so that
I think it's fifth to last. It's asked by Sigita Chayaviene at 10:56.
10:50. All right, great, yeah. Oh, that's a clever, that you follow the clock, so that's that's good one, yeah. Yeah, that's good. Sirpa, you are a lawyer, so that I rely on your. I don't want to say anything,
I guess that he's going to give this.
This is a legal.
I know, yeah. But I must say that altogether your questions are difficult. You put us tricky questions. But there is no special law on agencies as such. Each agency has a, if it uses the public powers, there's not necessarily all, but most of them, they have their own legislation on the Central Agency for Education, etc. And then, of course, we have like general pieces of legislation which concern the whole administration. For instance, the law on civil servants, which was, I think, mentioned in our colleague's speech, and so on. But the agency employees don't have a separate status legally. As it was told earlier that at the municipal sector, the legislation is different concerning the public servants there. But in the agencies, what we mean by agency is the state entities which more or less have the competencies to implement the general policies in various ministerial sectors, which are so-called subordinate to the ministries. Sometimes the word agency is used also when we talk about regional administration, but typically the word agency is used for pointing out the entities that work at the central level of government, central level of government, but beneath the ministries. We have different words and concepts for regional authorities.
Mr. Giroualis wants to clarify or
just wanted to follow up on this. I think, although it was not me who asked this question, but I know the subtext or the context actually. Sorry. I think it was not about whether the employees have a different status, because perhaps you also, as it has been already mentioned, there are civil servants and those who work under the labor code, right? So there's two basic regulations, and they can be also, as I understood, you could work in an agency, but have a contract, although it's not typically a rule. but this is about legal forms of institutions, because this is what we are discussing. I alluded briefly in my presentation, but we have simply too many legal forms, and this management challenges actually arise from not just from two different status, contract or civil service, but also various forms. I understood from your colleagues from Ministry of Finance presentation that agencies typically, it's not only, as you explained, not only the subordinate level to the ministries, but still at the central level. But also, as it has been mentioned, that if you don't exercise public power, you could still have, I know, a trust or foundation or a corporation, I think. So that was actually, I understand that the context of this question was, so it's agencies, corporations, trusts, what other forms you have, if you have at all, to do this implementation work, let's put it this way. Some of it may exercise public power, some could be, I don't know, analytical, which for example, we have Governmental Strategic Analysis Center, which is an agency in the sense that it's subordinate to the office of the government, but has a form which I cannot really translate into English. I think the equivalent would be a foundation, meaning that they can earn their own money from projects, and then we delegate certain amount of the budgets to them, but also in exchange for certain results, but they can raise their own money. So in the nutshell, it's about the variety of legal forms of these organizations, which can broadly be called agencies, although agency, I understand in your context, have a specific meaning.
I got it, thank you. From my part, I would say that there is a variety of forms, really, and sometimes, for instance, let's say there are very special roles also. For instance, the Center for Pensions, it has a special system, and some of these special agencies are under the Parliament directly. They have a parliamentary guidance. Then you have like the National Broadcasting Company, which is, like it's in a way it's a company, but it's also an agency. So it has public functions. But I would refer to Mikko from the Ministry of Finance. I think you are the best to answer this more specifically.
Yes, thank you, Sirpa. I'll try. Basically, the main forms are those that were mentioned on my slides, that there are these agencies and of course corporations, funds, and so forth. But when you look at this word agencies, that consists a wide range of different kind of organizational arrangements, I would say. But what is common to all of these is that they are part of the actual body of government. So which the corporations are as a legal entities are actually not. They're separate bodies, and so are municipalities, of course, and so forth. But these agencies are part of this actual body of government, and because of that, there is no a general law on agencies as such and their organizational form. That varies a lot, and there is, as Sirpa said, there is a special law for each one of those, basically. But then there are certain general laws on certain aspects of agencies. For example, the financial side, the financial planning of agencies, and for example, for, I would say, the human resources, personal side of agencies. So there are these kind of laws that stipulate certain things about the agencies. But all in all, the agencies can actually, they vary quite a lot, and their structure vary quite a lot, but they are all in the body of the central government, basically, when you look at it. The bottom line is that, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and let me stop everybody here because we do have a lot of questions coming in, and I'm glad that we have noticed that they were tough questions and very, very precise and very good questions. Actually, that just proves how determined this current Lithuanian government is in processing these and implementing the reforms. The good news is that we have asked the Finnish, and they have gladly agreed to answer these questions in writing by email. So whichever questions we have not answered, because there are quite a few still, we will send to the Finnish representatives by email, and the answers will be shared with everybody who has asked them. So thank you so much for that. But before we conclude, I want to give the final word to Mr. Seppo Mehta, who will say a couple of concluding sentences.
Well, a couple of concluding, perhaps not substance-based so much, but I really very much want to thank you for joining us to this session. And like I said in the beginning, that I hope that this will be considered from your side as a useful usage of time, so that you have got something to think of and perhaps to utilize then when you're preparing your reform program and so forth. And we'll be happy to continue discussions in some other time as well, so that please just send us a mail and so forth, so we can arrange another meeting as well if it's needed from your point of view. Thank you very, very much, and the very best of luck for your reform efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the fact that nearly no one has left the meeting proves that it was very useful and it was very instrumental. You will get the questions still. We will send them to you. Thank you so much. And especially we want to thank Mrs. Hanna Ojanen for her contribution with organizing this. And thank you so much for allocating your time. Thank you so very, very much. Have the rest.
Thank you very much, Hanna. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, colleagues. It's
Bye-bye.
very much appreciated. We'll get back to you for sure. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.